Welcome to our next Wandering Walk tour in historic Springfield, Illinois. Here's a chance to explore Springfield like never before. Nowhere else in the U.S. can you find a more complete and authentic sites related to the life of Abraham Lincoln than in Springfield. From the office where he did much of his work as a lawyer, to the old State House, Capitol Building, where he represented his state congressional district, to the home he lived in for 15 years before becoming president. Our tour begins in front of the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. The Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum was built in 2005, and it has become one of the most visited presidential libraries in the nation. The museum houses many original artifacts from Lincoln's lifetime. While these items are rotated from time to time, you can often view such things as Lincoln's original handwritten copy of the Gettysburg Address, his shaving kit, clothes, and hats he wore, and many items Mary Todd Lincoln owned in the White House. The museum also has life-size statues of Lincoln and his family, along with other famous people he interacted with over the course of his lifetime. For a more detailed view of the Abraham Lincoln Museum, check out my video that I did with a walkthrough of the whole museum. We're now headed towards the old State Capitol building and what's called Old State Capitol Plaza. Many of these buildings that you see were built in the late 1800s. One of the most important buildings you'll see is the Old State Capitol building. This building was completed in 1853. It's made of the Greek Revival style and constructed of local stone known as Sugar Creek limestone. Originally, the building was supposed to have been constructed in brick, but when the locals saw the beauty of the stone as the foundation was being laid, it was decided to construct the entire facade using this limestone. Inside the old Capitol building were the chambers of the Senate and House of Representatives. One of the most famous legislators to wander the halls of the Capitol building was Abraham Lincoln. He served one term as a state representative in 1840 to 1841. On several occasions, Lincoln pleaded cases before the Illinois Supreme Court in this building. It was here that he announced his candidacy for the U.S. Senate in 1858. During that speech, which many refer to as the House Divided Speech, he talked about the dangers of slavery and the possible disunion it would cause to the nation. While he didn't win the seat for senator, that speech is ranked as one of the most important and significant he ever delivered. 7 years after giving that speech, President Abraham Lincoln's body returned to the House chamber inside the old Capitol building to lay in state before his final burial in Oak Ridge Cemetery, just a few miles here from downtown Springfield. This tall building that we just saw is what's known as the Nelson Reisig Building. It was built in 1870 and was owned by John Nelson. Nelson operated a grocery store and saloon on the site. We're coming up on the Lincoln Herndon Law Office. It was at this building at the intersection of 6th and Adams that this particular building was constructed in 1841 to provide space for lawyers and other working professionals in downtown Springfield. It was inside this building, in a small office on the 3rd floor, Abraham Lincoln practiced law before becoming President of the United States. Abraham Lincoln first moved into the Tinsley Block building in 1843. He and his partner Stephen Logan opened their law practice in this location due to its closeness to the Illinois Supreme Court, which was just across the street. In 1844, the firm of Logan and Lincoln dissolved. Lincoln hired a younger lawyer, William Herndon, as a junior partner and continued to use the same office space inside the Tinsley Block building. They stayed here from 1844 to 1852. The site of Lincoln's law office is now a state historic site. You can tour the building to see both the office that Lincoln and Herndon operated from, as well as the renovated old federal court that was located inside the building. A large building across the street on our left is the Illinois building. It was built in 1927 and is one of the best examples of Art Deco design in the downtown area. We're now coming up on the Lincoln Home National Historic Site. In 1837, Abraham Lincoln moved from New Salem, Illinois to Springfield to begin his law career. Many of the personal events of Abraham Lincoln's life before he became president occurred in this historic neighborhood that's now preserved by the National Park Service. The historic site contains the home where Abraham Lincoln lived from 1844 to 1865. This was the only home President Lincoln ever owned. There are also several other buildings on the property that have been restored to their appearance when Lincoln would walk through these streets, pondering a law issue or figuring out how he would try to keep the nation from being torn apart. The National Park Service operates a small museum and visitor center right next to this neighborhood. Inside you can see a few objects from the preservation of the house and neighborhood, and a movie about what life was like in Springfield during the time Lincoln lived in the community. In 1837, an aspiring young lawyer moved from the Illinois countryside to Springfield to jumpstart his legal career. Abraham Lincoln felt that Springfield would provide a much larger population to expand his practice. 5 years later, Lincoln married Mary Todd, and in 1844, they purchased this home at 8th and Jackson Street for $1,200. Home they purchased right across the street is the brown home that you see. This Greek Revival style house would be the home of the Lincolns for the next 17 years. When the house was first built, it was not the large structure that you see today. The first structure Lincoln built was only 1 story tall and didn't have a back portion of the house. As the family grew, Lincoln added the second story. He did that around 1856. 3 of Lincoln's 4 sons were born inside the house. One of those children, Edward, died here in 1850. The Lincolns weren't much into landscaping or gardening. Mary loved flowers, but she was too busy raising the children, and Abe worked all the time. Fortunately, Mary's sister Frances would come by from time to time and plant flowers and help them cook with a small vegetable garden that they grew. In 1860, Lincoln became a presidential candidate. This home would be central to his election activities. Visitors would stop by and strategize on how best to nominate Lincoln at the Republican convention and then work with him on his presidential campaign. After winning the office of President of the United States, Abraham and Mary made several farewell receptions inside the home. They then sold much of the furniture, gave their dog to a trusted neighbor, and rented a home so they could move to Washington, D.C. After Lincoln's assassination in 1865, Mary Todd decided not to move back into the home due to her being totally devastated by his death. She moved to Chicago and then spent time in later years in Europe. In her later years, she did move back to Springfield but lived with her sister in another part of town. In 1960, the home became a National Historic Landmark, and in 1971, it became a National Historic Site and is now maintained and preserved by the National Park Service. Again, most of these homes were here during the time of Lincoln, when he lived here prior to becoming president, and now all of them are preserved in this historic neighborhood. Most of these homes were built in the mid 1800s to the late 1800s. This six-story building across the street is known as the Picari Building. The Picari Commerce Building was constructed in 1922 and originally served as a meeting location for the Elks Club of Springfield. This building was more than just a sanctuary for the 2,300 Elks Club members who lived in Springfield. The purpose of such a large building made it more like a civic center at the time. There was a 2,000-seat auditorium for Elk Club meetings, but it also had 100 hotel rooms for traveling businessmen, a banquet hall, a swimming pool, bowling alley, and various lounges for playing billiards and cards. When Adlai Stevenson ran for president in 1952, this was also the location for his campaign headquarters. We're now heading towards the Illinois State Capitol building. This is actually the sixth Capitol building to house the legislative and executive branches of the Illinois state government. Construction on this French Renaissance and Italianate style building began in 1868 and was completed in 1888. It cost about $4.5 million to construct the Capitol. The Illinois State Capitol is the tallest non-skyscraper Capitol building in the United States. The top of the dome stands at 361 feet. Now, the Capitol buildings for Nebraska and Louisiana are taller, but they have a non-classical style and a design that resembles more of a skyscraper. Across from us, behind this wrought iron fence and the pretty green grass, is the executive mansion for the state of Illinois. It was built in 1855 and is home to the governor of Illinois. It is the third oldest state governor's home in the United States. It's also the oldest historic state residence in Illinois. Except for times where the home has gone through a remodeling phase, every Illinois state governor has lived in this home. Many important social events have occurred inside the mansion over the past 160 years. 7 U.S. presidents have been received inside the home with lavish reception. One of those was Abraham Lincoln, who was often a visitor of the governor's home when he would return to Illinois during his presidency. In 1952, Governor Adlai Stevenson sat in his ground floor listening to the election results on the radio. Stevenson was the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party in 1952. While the home is large, over 16 rooms can be found inside the manor, the governor and his family live in a smaller private 7-room area on the second floor. The rest of the mansion is reserved for state dinners, meetings, and tours. The downstairs area has been renovated to return it back to how it looked in the 1800s. The Illinois Capitol Building houses the chambers for the Illinois General Assembly. This includes the House of Representatives and the Illinois Senate. The office of the governor is also inside the Illinois State Capitol Building. If you were to view the Capitol Building from above, it's in the shape of a Greek cross. The dome sits in the middle of the building, and there are 4 equal-sized wings on each side of the dome that are aligned with the major compass points. You will notice a really pretty silver covering on the dome. It's actually covered in zinc, which doesn't weather away. In 2011, the building was completely renovated. One of the most interesting features added in the renovation was the installation of several maiden statue lamps at the base of the grand staircase. Those were actually put in 1888 during the construction, but the legislators thought that the scantily clad women were too risque for the building. But they decided to put them back in 2011. As mentioned, this is the 6th Capitol building for Illinois. The first state Capitol building was located in Kaskaskia, Illinois. The Kaskaskia is a small river town near the Mississippi River that was founded in 1709. In 1820, the state legislature voted to move the capital to Vandalia, Illinois. 3 Capitol buildings were constructed in Vandalia between 1820 and 1837. But in 1836, a young lawyer by the name of Abraham Lincoln and many of his colleagues pushed to have the capital moved to Springfield. Springfield was located more in the central portion of the state, and the population around the area was growing tremendously. In 1837, construction began on the fifth capital for the state of Illinois, which is the one that you see today. I hope you've enjoyed this wandering walk tour in historic downtown Springfield, Illinois, home of the Illinois State Capitol, many Abraham Lincoln sites, as well as being a long part of historic Route 66. Please make sure to like and subscribe to this video, and we'll see you next time. Bye.